As protests against racism continue to spread, so does the coronavirus. So, what do scientists say? The answer may shock you. Welcome back to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. After the death of George Floyd 2 weeks ago, protests have continued across the country, from Washington to the other Washington. And it all raises a very important question. Why are we not social distancing anymore? Do we no longer have to wear face masks to stop the coronavirus? According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, we're still seeing hundreds, if not over 1,000 cases of the coronavirus in the U.S. every day. The coronavirus is still spreading, and CDC guidelines are still telling people to stay at least 6 feet from other people and to stay out of crowded places and avoid mass gatherings. It makes me think of those anti-lockdown protests a few weeks ago, where people weren't practicing social distancing. State governors called people out for it.
It looks a lot like a political rally out there as opposed to something that really is about the substance of the stay-home order and why it's important that we take this aggressive stance with COVID-19.
And the media were all like, these anti-lockdown protests are a risk to your health. But now, there are even bigger protests. And the same media are all like, we all support these protests. So how did America go from protests during coronavirus are dangerous to protests during coronavirus are fine? You might think this is hypocritical. The coronavirus doesn't care about people's politics. But you'd be wrong. It does care about people's politics. Scientists are now saying the coronavirus is not much to worry about as long as you're protesting against systemic racism. That's not a joke. That's what scientists are actually telling us now. This open letter was published in the first week of June. It was signed by more than 1,200 people, including prominent scientists, infectious disease professionals, and university professors. It compares the anti-lockdown protest by heavily armed and predominantly white protesters to the recent demonstrations in response to ongoing, pervasive, and lethal institutional racism. And here comes the science. A public health response to these demonstrations is also warranted, but this message must be wholly different from the response to white protesters resisting stay-home orders. Infectious disease and public health narratives adjacent to demonstrations against racism must be consciously anti-racist, and infectious disease experts must be clear and consistent in prioritizing an anti-racist message. So, what they're saying is infectious disease experts should prioritize an anti-racist message instead of stopping the spread of an infectious disease, which is the thing they're experts in. I'm 100% for ending racism, but what these experts are saying concerns me. You may have heard that Black Americans are dying of COVID-19 at a much higher rate than white people. The reasons for that are complicated, but it is true. Black Americans are dying more from COVID-19. So shouldn't the infectious disease experts be more concerned about this kind of gathering than this kind of gathering? Well, these health experts say no. Now, they acknowledge that Black Americans have a higher risk of both getting and dying from COVID-19. But they say that COVID-19 among Black patients is caused by white supremacy. Therefore, these experts support the George Floyd protests as vital to the national public health and to the threatened health specifically of Black people in the United States. Now, to be fair, the experts are saying that protesters should wear face masks, keep 6 feet apart, not mingle with other groups, and stay home if they're sick. But many of those things don't seem to be happening. These public health experts also say that officials should prepare for an increased number of infections in the days following a protest, and they acknowledge that people are putting themselves at risk by attending protests. But the overall message of the open letter is that these protests are justified despite the risk of spreading the coronavirus, because they're for a good cause. Which is why these experts don't support the anti-lockdown protests, because those were definitely racist. This should not be confused with a permissive stance on all gatherings, particularly protests against stay-home orders. Those actions not only oppose public health interventions, but are also rooted in white nationalism and run contrary to respect for black lives. Now, some people may be upset by this letter, but I am impressed how these experts have made a profound scientific breakthrough. After several weeks of rigorous anecdotal sampling, they've come to the conclusion that the coronavirus does care about your politics. Here's how it works. If you join a protest to end the lockdown, your racist mentality weakens your immune system. So you're actually more likely to get the coronavirus. But if you protest to end racism, it creates a force field that protects you and all your loved ones from the coronavirus, even if you don't wear a mask or practice social distancing. I happen to think that's an excellent theory. Now, not all health experts agree with this theory. For example, Dr. Anthony Fauci has expressed concerns about the coronavirus spreading because of the recent nationwide protests. And those are the same concerns he expressed several weeks ago during the anti-lockdown protests. But that's just the opinion of one random white guy, right? Anyway, the issue here isn't about whether people should be protesting. This is America. People can determine for themselves what personal risks they are willing to take to exercise their constitutional rights. The issue is whether health experts, people who are scientists, should allow their personal political beliefs to influence the health advice they give to the public. When people see health experts telling people which protests are okay and which are not, based not on science but on their personal political beliefs, that damages their credibility. Now, we expect politicians to change their stance based on politics, which is why it's no surprise that Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan and a Democrat, who criticized the anti-lockdown protests, marched with the George Floyd protesters. But when people protest stay-at-home orders because they want to go back to work, and then public health experts call them white nationalists, do you think those people will ever listen to public health experts again? Politicization of science is dangerous, and we've already seen that with the coronavirus after the World Health Organization lost credibility for becoming China's coronavirus accomplice, and then lost even more credibility when it came out how China was withholding data from them the whole time. Now, people don't really trust the WHO anymore. So, what if the protests cause another coronavirus spike? It's unlikely that government officials and public health experts will be able to impose another lockdown, because the protests have made it clear that social distancing is over. Now, on the other hand, maybe it will turn out that these large group gatherings are not that dangerous after all. Like if the coronavirus doesn't spread as easily outdoors, even when large groups of people are close together and yelling. Or maybe it was never that dangerous to begin with. But if that's the case, there would be no reason to criticize Trump for wanting to restart MAGA rallies this month despite the coronavirus. But remember, as the head of the New York City Council Health Committee tweeted, if there is a spike in coronavirus cases in the next 2 weeks, don't blame the protesters, blame racism. So what do you think? Leave your comments below. And we need your support to keep making episodes like this, because YouTube apparently doesn't like our nonpartisan approach to issues, and they ruthlessly demonetize a lot of our videos. So support us by going to patreon.com/AmericaUncovered and pledge $1 or more per episode. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.